The name for part 3 of 4. This is what is going to bring us to the point today of making the pas, meaning step in French but also not, that I have to make for you. A large part of the illusions that make us stop short, imaginary adherences, never mind that everyone remains more or less with their feet stuck in them like flies, but not psychoanalysts, are very precisely linked to what I would call the illusions of formal logic. Formal logic is a very useful science, as I tried to direct you last time towards this idea, on condition that you grasp that it leads you astray in this respect, that since it is formal logic, it should forbid you at all times from seeing it as making any sense whatsoever. So, you know very well where we have got to, given the time. But those gravely serious, brave, honest men of symbolic logic, as it has been known as for the last 50 years, this gives them, I assure you, a whopping great headache, because it isn't easy to construct a logic such that it must be, if it really justifies the title of formal logic, only strictly based on the signifier, forbidding itself any relation to, and hence all intuitive use of any insurgent signified that arises when we make a mistake. In general, this is how we work out where we are. My reasoning is flawed because, if that is the case, it could result in just about anything, my grandmother standing on her head. So what does this approach do for us? It is not generally with this that we are guided, because we are very intuitive. If we do formal logic, this is all we can be. And yet, the amusing thing is that the founding book of formal logic, the Principia Mathematica by Bertrand Russell and Whitehead, manages to arrive at this something that is as close as possible to the aim, the approved status of a formal logic worthy of this name, to encompass all the needs of the mathematic creation. But the authors stop short themselves, considering as a contradiction in nature that puts into question the whole of mathematical logic. This so-called Russell's paradox is about something which goes in a direction that hits at the core value of what is called set theory. What distinguishes a set from a class definition? This is something that is left in relative ambiguity, since what I am going to tell you, and it's something that is accepted by any old mathematician, i.e., that what distinguishes a set from this form of definition that is called a class is nothing other than the collection will be defined by formulae that are called axioms, that are put up on the blackboard in symbols that will be reduced to letters, to which a few supplementary signifiers are adjoined indicating the relations involved. There is absolutely nothing else to indicate the difference between this so-called symbolic logic and traditional logic, besides this reduction to letters. I guarantee it, you can take my word for it, without me going on about further examples of it. What then is the merit? There has to be an advantage somewhere, in order that as a result of this sole difference a heap of consequences can be developed, of which, I assure you, the impact on the development of something called maths is not meagre, in relation to the instrument that had been available for centuries and which, not having budged between Aristotle and Kant, has returned the compliment paid to it. This advantage, if things are left to run on as they have been, for the Principia Mathematica fills two very, very fat volumes which have only one very thin benefit, but, in the end, if the compliment is returned, is very much that the instrument, as it was before, had, for some reason, become singularly stagnant. So from there, how do the authors come to be astonished by what is called Russell's paradox? Russell's paradox is this one. We speak of the set of all the sets that do not include, comprennent in French, themselves. I have to give you a bit of the story, which may seem rather dry to you at first, but let me point something out to you straight away. If what I am saying interests you, at least I hope it does, it's aimed at this, that there is the closest possible relationship with, and not only homonymic, precisely because it is a question of signifiers, and as a consequence it is a question of not including, ne pas comprendre. There is the closest possible relationship with the position of the analytic subject, insofar as she, he also, in another meaning of the word comprendre, i.e. to understand, and if I tell you not to understand, it's so that you may be able to understand in every way possible, that she, he also does not understand her himself. Going through this is not useless, you will see, for along the way we are going to be able to review the function of our object. But let's pause for a moment on the question of these sets that do not include themselves. Clearly, in order to conceptualize what it is about, we have to leave, since we cannot all the same, in the process of communicating them, not allow ourselves concessions to intuitive references, because intuitive references, you already have them, thus we have to budge them to make room for others. As you have the idea that there is a class, and that there is a class of mammals, all the same it is necessary that I try to point out to you that we have to refer to something else. When we enter the category of sets, we have to refer to bibliographic classifications, dear to some, classifications composed of decimals or the like. But when one has something written that has to be arranged somewhere, we have to know how to locate it automatically. So let's take a set that includes itself. Take, for example, humanities studies in a bibliographic classification system. Clearly, the works of humanists on the humanities must be placed in the interior. The set of humanities studies must include all the works concerning humanities studies as such. But let's consider now the set that does not include itself. That is no less conceivable, it's even the more usual case. And since we are set theorists, and there is already a class of the set of sets that do include themselves, there is really no objection to what we do with the opposing class. I use the term class here because it is very much here that the ambiguity is going to dwell. The class of sets that do not include themselves, the set of all sets that do not include themselves. And it's here that the logicians start doing their heads in, i.e. that they say to themselves, this set of all sets that do not include themselves, does it include itself, or does it not include itself? In each case it is going to fall into a contradiction, for if, as it would appear, it includes itself, here we are in contradiction with where we started from, which told us that it concerns sets that do not include themselves. On the other hand, if it does not include itself, precisely how can it be an exception to what this definition gives us, i.e. that it does not include itself? This might seem rather babyish to you, but the fact that it hits so hard that it stops them in their tracks, the logicians, who are precisely not the kind of people to stop at some idle problem, and that they sense here something which they can call a contradiction that puts their whole edifice on the line, it's very much that there is something that has to be resolved, and that concerns, if you're willing to listen to me, nothing other than this. That concerns the only thing that the logicians in question have not exactly seen, i.e. that the letter that they are using is something that has powers within itself, a pushback to which they do not at all seem to be accustomed.